Right, so we will get going. So, good morning, everybody. My name is Michael Gore. We've got some time this. First of all, thank you for joining us. I think, as Chloe mentioned at the beginning there, if you can make sure you're on mute, I guess you all are. And if you've got any questions, if the audience is so small, ask the questions. I really don't as we go along. But if not, either in the chat at the end or just put your hand up and we can answer the questions there. Anyway, the whole point of talking about renovating your phone system in this post-COVID world is that things have changed. Without stating the blindingly obvious, things have changed in the way that people work and the acceptance of the way that people work. There are some statistics, Chloe, if you could move on, that I highlight this. Which talk about the adult population working from home is 60%, which is quite staggering. And people find that they're more productive. I can say from a, certainly from a cobweb point of view, I think we're pretty productive lot as we already are. But you do tend to get more done because of the fewer interruptions that you have. Hang on, I'll just wait for Andrew to join us. And it talks about, employees have more freedom in their working day. They work longer hours. I'm not sure about the longer hours. Maybe there's an element of that. I just think they're better hours. But the point of the matter is that this situation that we've got here in relation to working from home or working remotely is, next slide, Chloe, please, is definitely here to stay. One of the things that we've been at Cobweb so focused on is, especially when it first happened, was helping people to scramble to accommodate working from home. You had a number of customers. There was two elements to this, really. There was a number of customers who used 365 and didn't realize that they had Teams, surprisingly. And of course, the adoption of that was very rapid. And then, of course, the next thing to do was try and bring in telephony, which is what this webinar is about, to bring in telephony for them to be able to talk to the customers and be reached by the customers. But I think it's safe to say that remote working is here to stay. Many companies had a reluctance to do it because they weren't sure about the productivity that I mentioned earlier on. And it was just against the company ethos. The forced changes that have come about have caused companies to look at themselves and decide that, this is something that we can implement in our business model. Whether it means changing the size of the physical offices, that's certainly in London. That's something that's been talked about extensively. But definitely it is here to stay. Chloe, next slide, please. So the problems that people had when this happened was, well, how do I do this? I've got a telephone system that's already there. How can I make that work? The reality is, initially, people couldn't because they didn't know how to. One of the things it says on the slides here, only connects when you're at your office desk. Well, things have changed with the introduction of Microsoft Business Voice and the other things that we can do. The days of the number being attached to a device have gone. The number belongs to the individual, and it means that you can take, your number with you anywhere and be reached at any time, assuming that you want to be reached at any time. I can see some people probably throwing their hands up and saying, there are times when I don't want to be. Well, when you don't want to be, there's something we can do about that as well. But nevertheless, that number is now, it belongs to you. I have experience, as I think we all have, when I've been reaching out to the customers that we have and the ones that I have specific responsibility for, I'm unable to get them. I ring the main number, the office may be closed. I ring the DDI, that's terminating on a desk somewhere or in an office somewhere, and it's impossible to get hold of people. You do still have the option of email, and that's perhaps what I did in the majority of cases, but it was very difficult. So it was very difficult for me to get hold of people, but it was also difficult for the company's customers to get hold of them. And of course, with the option of furloughing people, that made the situation even worse. Next slide, Chloe. And then along came Teams. Well, everybody would appear to have heard of Teams now, and how can we make that work? It says 75 million are already using Teams. I think it's probably more than that now. So you had the Teams element of 365, which certainly gave you your internal communication, but you didn't have that external communication, given that your PBX was in a geographical location somewhere else. But Business Voice, or the introduction of Business Voice, completed that move to allow people to be remote in the way that I'm going to explain in a moment. But also some of the ways, some of the not objections, but some of the challenges that companies had in making this happen. Next one, Chloe. And here are some of the examples, the blockers to Microsoft 365 Business Voice, and the very real ones as well, because people thought, I've just bought a PBX system. Well, if you've just spent an amount of money on a new telephone system, whether it's an on-premise one or whether it's in the cloud, you've just spent money on it, and you're not necessarily in a position just to abandon that to accommodate Business Voice. Some have, by the way, but for other companies, they're not necessarily in a position to do that. And then, we're tied to a contract with an existing telecom provider. Very good point. You may have a situation where your telephone system is of an age where you can write it off and go to Business Voice, but you may have some contractual arrangement with another company for the supply of numbers and lines and SIP trunks and all that kind of thing. Well, we have a way of getting around that as well. Our existing telecom provider doesn't support Microsoft Teams. Well, that's not an issue anymore. And so on. I'm not going to go around the whole circle, but these are real objections, understandable objections, but we do have a way of solving that problem, or those problems. Chloe, next slide, please. Call to Teams, or call to Teams to trunks. What this talks about is a way to retain your PBX and or retain your supplier of your SIP connectivity and your numbers and so on. The fundamental reason to do this is people want to light up they want to light up Teams by utilizing Business Voice and or their existing infrastructure. They want to keep their minutes to pool their minutes. At the moment, you have an amount of minutes on a per user basis. Well, we can aggregate that across the entire estate. So in a Business Voice world, Microsoft 365 Business Voice world, if you have 10 users, you have 1,200 minutes per user. That's domestic and international. That can be aggregated across 10, which is 12,000, or across 100, 120,000. Unless you're involved in some kind of outbound telemarketing, the likelihood of paying for another telephone call outside of your calling plan is pretty remote, to say the least. People say, well, I can't disrupt what I've currently got. I'm thinking about the retention of their existing platforms. Well, there isn't any disruption. All of this is done as a cloud service. You integrate your existing PBX into Microsoft through Call to Teams, and that lights up your Teams to give you the ability to make and take calls with your own DDIs, whether you take new DDIs or retain the direct dialing inwards. Direct dialing inwards. Whether you retain the ones that you've got or whether you adopt new ones, that option is there for you to do. Another point is people say, I need to keep my existing number. People may have a number in range of, I don't know, 1 to 20, 30, 40, 50, doesn't really matter. I need to keep my numbers. They may have what they refer to as a golden number, which is the one that the outside world sees as your primary number for contact. Well, of course, we can do that. You can either keep those numbers on the platform that you've currently got, or if you go through to Business Voice with calling plan, you can migrate those numbers. Those numbers are yours, so they would come from the supplier that you currently have. So let's just say it was BT. We would migrate those numbers for you from BT. I use them just as an example to Microsoft, and those numbers are yours and remain yours. We talk about one-click setup means no downtime or disruption. That's precisely what happens. There is nobody comes along anymore with a torch and a screwdriver and does whatever they do. All of this is done from a cloud services point of view. At the end of when I finish speaking, I suspect there'll be questions in this area. I'm more than happy to elaborate on how we do that. Chloe, next one, please. We have here an example of one of our customers, which Oyster, the yacht builder, and they had a requirement to move their PBX capability to a better platform, but they were in a long-term relationship with their SIP provider, with the people who supplied them lines. And what we were able to do was, through call to teams to trunks, it allowed them to retain the relationship with the supplier that they currently had for lines and minutes and so on and so forth, but still avail themselves of business voice. Microsoft Business Voice is available in two flavors from a licensing point of view. Both of them have exactly the same content in feature functionality, but one is with a calling plan that I mentioned earlier on, and one is without a calling plan. Well, in this instance, Oyster Yachts took the without calling plan because they needed to retain what they currently had with their existing supplier. So not the telephone system, that went, but for the connectivity and numbers. And we were able to do that through our trunk to Teams capability, which, as I say, is a cloud-based one. And all that happens, effectively what happens, is the trunks that come in don't terminate in the company premise anymore. They are pointed directly into Microsoft, and through the ability of what is known as session border controllers, which is like session border controllers are firewalls for telephony. So if you can imagine that Fortress Microsoft has all these patrol guards wandering around, making sure that people don't get into their domain unless they have the right credentials. That's what session border controllers do. It's a control point that says, okay, yeah, you can come in. And that's what we do with trunk to Teams. And as a consequence, that then interfaces directly into the teams that people have through their 365 subscription. And it lights Teams up. So you have this ability. So you've effectively removed your PBX capability that you've had and replaced it with business voice, but retained your connectivity from an existing supplier, either from choice or from contractual for contractual reasons. Next one. Okay, nearly finished. So this is rather fast, but I'm hoping there'll be questions. But the next steps, first of all, obviously download the Business Voice ebook, which will give you even more details. But I'm happy to talk to anybody if they've got specific questions, not just now within this webinar, but going forward. We're also in a position now to offer 1 month's free trial of Microsoft 365 with Business Voice and Call to Teams for up to 25 users. It's a really good offer. It allows you to get a feel for what this would look like. It can be implemented across as up to 25 users. So it's a real test and understanding of what Business Voice would feel like. The take-up that we've had has been phenomenal. This is not me blowing the trumpet of cobweb. It is a reflection on what Microsoft have actually achieved with Business Voice. If I go back into my background, has always been about networks and voice. So I do have a knowledge in this area. And the Holy Grail always used to be what people would call unified communications. And if you look at some of the major suppliers, so the Mitels and the Vias and Alcatels of this world, and some cloud-based ones as well, they did a pretty reasonable job of putting together unified communications, but it was done with disparate elements that they would corral together to give that unified communications feel. The reality was it wasn't fully unified communication because they were different elements, as I mentioned. What Microsoft have done with Business Voice is they are able to offer real unified communications because of the desktop control that they have and the superb take-up of Teams. So if an organization is team-centric, so people communicate with each other every day through Teams, introducing seamlessly the Business Voice element of it has given them a real unified communications platform that people want. The challenge was, what do I do with what I've currently got? And I hope that with what I've said over the last 17, 18 minutes is an insight into how, if it's required, you can retain your existing platform, or you can retain your existing SIP provider with the associated numbers and so on and so forth. And all of that can be underpinned by free Microsoft Teams webinar. The next one is on the 2nd of July, which obviously goes into much greater detail for those of you who are not completely familiar with Teams. I suspect there are fewer and fewer like that, but there are still, I still learn things about Teams, and I use it every day for 12 hours a day. To Frisbee. Next slide, which I think is the final slide. So thank you for joining, but please, many questions, I hope.
Hi, Michael.
Hi.
Hi, it's Richard from Peter Duffy's.
Hi, Richard.
Hi. I just wanted to know your thoughts on the benefits between using SIP and a straight VoIP technology.
Well, I think there's a separation there. I mean, SIP is just the, that's the connectivity element of it. The voice over IP is the feature functionality. That's the way I see it. And if I look at what's out there, there are different companies offering all kinds of things, whether they be cloud-based or whether they be CPE premise-based. And I think it's fair to say that all of them are pretty good. There's nothing fundamentally wrong with them at all. And if you're operational in some kind of sophisticated call center environment, then you've probably made an investment with Mitel and Avaya and all these people, and that's the right thing to do. But for the vast majority of organizations, whether they be from 5 or to 5,000, Microsoft has a solution. It's just that the business voice sits in this 300 and below space where they really had never addressed it before, and have come along with something which is, in my opinion, as good and not better than some of the things that are out there based upon feature functionality. But where they really score heavily is the implementation into what they've already got. If you're a 365 user, you've got Teams. If you then want to add the voice capability, to do it is the introduction of a license. Irrespective of what the situation is with your current platform or your current supplier of SIP connectivity. SIP connectivity, from that point of view, is just the relationship with Gamma, for example, that you supply you with your connectivity. And all they're going to do, instead of terminating that on an IP switch somewhere, they're going to be pointing that to call to Teams for trunks to get it into the Microsoft world with the centurions that I described walking around saying who can and who can't come in.
Yeah. Is the software hardware agnostic? I'm just thinking about phones that we've already got. Obviously they're all digital, but is there any way you can incorporate them into the model? Yeah,
well, so let's take, for example, let's say someone has an existing platform, PBX. I'll use Mitel as an example. That company will probably make a significant investment in handsets, let alone the PBX. They're very good, but they're not cheap. So the question is, can I retain my handsets? The answer is absolutely, because you're retaining your PBX in that scenario. You're taking a call to Teams solution, which is effectively connecting into Microsoft and into Teams itself, but your PBX and the phones that go with it, nothing changes at all. So when you pick your phone up and you make a call, when you have your headset on and you make a call, if that's the way you do it, by the way, if you've got your headset on and you're looking at your Teams and you're looking at calls and you key a number in, that call effectively goes up to Microsoft, because that's the connectivity, if you like, that's the interface for Teams, and then that's actually pushed out through your PBX. So all your existing call plans remain the same, your numbers remain the same, your functionality remains the same, nothing changes.
Right, okay.
I think I'll just jump in and add a little bit more onto what Michael was saying. I think if you're in a world where you've got say headsets or little pucks for voice, so, I mean personally I've got Surface headphones at home that I use. They work absolutely fine with Teams, but they're not Teams certified. So the call controls on the device doesn't work. I have to use the buttons in the app. Whereas on my Sennheiser Puck, which is Teams certified, I can end the call by pressing the end call button on the device. So non-certified devices absolutely work with Teams. You just have to use the call controls within the app as opposed to call controls on the device. But a lot of different devices have got firmware upgrades which make them Teams compatible depending on the age of the device as well.
And that's very relevant in relation to business voice, with or without calling plan. But in the example that you asked me there, Richard, about retention of handsets, provided they're still attached to the PBX that's currently there, and it's a call to team solution, then nothing changes.
I can see that Andrew has got his hand up to ask a question. Andrew?
Yeah, well, thanks. Your answer to my first question was, can we still use our old handsets as well as calling through Teams? So the answer seems to be yes. You can sit at your desk, use your Teams on your laptop, your handset, your mobile device, and potentially have 8 things ringing at once, which is always nice. My other questions, of course, are pricing. So the Microsoft license for Teams voice without the calling plan, and this thing you've explained here today. What's the list pricing for each of those?
I'm quite happy to talk about pricing. It's available everywhere. Business voice with the calling plan, end user price is £12. Without calling plan is £7.50. So with the calling plan, so that's someone who's made the decision to go completely to business voice, which I have to say is the majority, given the circumstances of what they've already got. That attracts a call plan of 1,200 minutes, as I mentioned, domestic minutes, which are for landline or PSTN and mobile minutes, but can be aggregated across the entire estate. So that the likelihood is you would not be running out of minutes. There is an additional bolt onto that for international calling, which I believe is £9 for 600 minutes. But there again, there's a couple of ways of doing that. I have people that I talk to who have a requirement for some international calling, and but it doesn't necessitate 10 users having the bolt on. So what they can have are called communication credits. And communication credits are where you effectively charge up an account. You put, I don't know, picking a figure of £50, something like that, £40. And all the users who have business voice, who make international calls, that call charge is taken out of that deposit, if you like. And because call charges, international call charges, are so low these days, and I mean, clearly there are some exceptions to that. So if you were calling a calling box in the Falklands Island, you might pay a few quid more, but in the main, it's very attractive. And that's a way of analyzing whether or not you need to get the bolt on. The other advantage of communication credits, of course, is that it's shared across the entire estate, whereas the 600 minutes is only shared between people who have the add-on. So it's different, it depends on what the application is, but there is a solution there to suit, most people.
Super. And the calls to Teams licensing?
Sorry, the call to Teams licensing is £3.50 end user.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, Michael, do you want to add anything whilst I've got you there? I might as well use you.
No, nothing to add. I think you covered everything incredibly well. I think for me, the beauty that I see when I'm talking with customers around call to Teams is it enables you to plug into that existing infrastructure, and even if it's only for a short period of time before people are able to get back into the office, it's a solution to help you get people back up and running with access to accessing their existing phone numbers and their systems while they're remote working, before they get to go back into the office and get to pick up where they were with the systems tied into the office. So I think it's a great option for better enabling remote workers to continue to provide services for your own customers while everybody's not in the office and access to their traditional systems.
I think, an additional takeaway to that as well is that, the focus understandably just now is on remote working people at home. And of course, as things get better, hopefully things get better, there will be a return to offices, not in the same numbers as before, in my opinion, in the general accepted opinion. But it's my point that I made earlier on, that in this business voice world, a telephone number doesn't belong to a device anymore. It's wherever you are, given that you want to take it. So, the fact that you're working from home, clearly, I mean, it helps, but there will be occasions, many occasions, hopefully, when things are returned to normal, when you're not in the office and you're not at home, but you still have that same flexibility. So whether you're sat in a hotel room in Halifax or Hanover, it makes no difference whatsoever. That call comes to you and it's delivered on your laptop, if that's what you've got in front of you, or your mobile phone, as I've got here with the Teams app, which, by the way, I should mention very briefly, the Teams app that's available on iOS and Android and Windows is extremely good. What does that mean? It gives you everything that you've currently got when you're looking at Teams on a screen as I am now, and it works consistently. There are lots of other apps that sit on mobiles which don't work quite so well, and if something doesn't work quite so well, people don't use it. In the Teams world, on a mobile handset, I genuinely use it all the time. I have the ability to make calls and take calls. I have the ability for separation as well. If anybody who's on this call, if they call me on my DDI, that call will, and I'm not here, which I would be all the time at the moment, but if I'm out and about, that call will come through to my Teams on my handset. Good morning, Michael Gore, can I help you? Yep, chat, end of call. Finish the call and I think, God, I've just thought of something. I need to call that individual back. I call them back through Teams on my mobile because it's there and I've got the number, but it also comes out of my combined minutes. It's not coming out of my personal call plan that's on my mobile. And as a consequence, it maybe gives any company, the opportunity to revise what their policy is in relation, to payment for mobile phones. It's that kind of nuance that you only really embrace once you start to use it. Okay, Chloe, I think I've evangelized enough now.
I was going to say, you could talk about voice forever if I let you.
Indeed, I would. Indeed, I could. I'd be happy to. But
that was absolutely great. And if no one's got any more questions, then we will call it there. But be sure to check your inbox later today or tomorrow morning, as I will be sharing this recording as well as additional information about Business Voice, Teams, and the offer that we were referring to in the deck earlier as well. But thank you very much for joining, everyone. Thank you, Michael, for taking the time to do this for us. And enjoy the rest of your day, everyone.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.